Hello there! I'm back with more doll customizing stuff, which I thought I would be done with for at least a little bit once I finished Val, but I got kind of excited, I bought some stuff on eBay, and then I also went to Goodwill for the first time in a while, and I found Howleen! That's her name, right, Howleen? But I found her just kind of underneath a bunch of stuffed animals, and I was like, oh my god. What are the odds that I would find a Monster High doll in my first time going there in years? That day was actually pretty lucky overall. Maybe I should have gotten a lottery ticket. And she was a good find, too. Look at this, she's got like a Draculaura hand, and missing the other hand, and actually a pretty good build overall. Now, you might be wondering what I'm sitting on, and this is actually some old molds from when I tried to do cool dragon-handed resin dolls back when I was making a bunch of those. And while they didn't quite work out for what I was intending, they could work for giving Howleen some new hands. So I got my window open, my table's all cleared out, let's get started. You can see here that I did actually change my mind and go outside, which is reasonable, because the resin bottles I had gotten, like, months ago were giant and unwieldy and got resin everywhere. So it was just much easier to go outside. Quick side note, though. Notice how I didn't cover my forearms. That was a stupid decision, and I'll tell you why. Because you're supposed to cover your hands and your arms and everything whenever you work with resin. And I, for the longest time, was doing it inside with a window open, which, in retrospect, wasn't great ventilation. And also, my arms were covered in sweaters, like you saw in the Resin Cat videos. So the thought never occurred for me to have something to cover my forearms. And now I got this weird hive thing going on, which is 50% sure is from the resin. And even if it was poison ivy, you know what would have solved it? Covering my forearms. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm mad at myself for making this mistake for the longest time. I know better now. And this is precisely why you should be, like, 13 or older to mess with this stuff. Because, like, it's dangerous as heck. And I've been messing with it and not doing it quite correctly for months. Which is very bad. So, like, do it outside. Cover your arms and torso and anything that can be exposed to it. And just be careful, please. And if you're too young to mess with it, just don't get a parent, or maybe don't even do it. Get, like, air dry clay or something. That's probably easier to work with and much, much, much safer. Right, okay, sorry. I got a little sidetracked there. Back to the video. So, initially I was thinking, okay, I can just rip off her forearms and dunk them into the molds, but then I realized I don't remember where the hands and feet are. So I just went ahead and put some matchsticks into the resin, and just kinda held them there for the whole time it took to cure. Or at least until I could get them stiff enough to not float away from me. It took a couple tries. The second time, I accidentally gave a foot rather than a hand, which just solidifies the fact that I made the right decision. And I ended up with some cool looking, like, wine red hands it's still mostly black, but it's got some red in there. I also made, like, 4 resin doll molds off camera, just to be sure I had something so I wouldn't have to bring out these big, obnoxious bottles again. I put the hands on in a way that at the resting pose, her hands would be on her hips, you know, like hands supposed to work. It doesn't pose as good, because I had to hot glue the wrists on there, but it's enough to work. Overall, moderate success, but maybe next time I'll look into something clay-based. Maybe epoxy sculpt, that might work. This was some better quality yarn than the other stuff I was working with, so it didn't get nearly as stringy and kind of, like, raspy as the other types. She has some discoloration on her face, and I decided to roll with that and give her some corrupted dark colors on that side of the face. But first I had to do her many eyes on that side. While that was drying, I put some paint on her forearms to kind of blend the hands to the arms. I put some Testors Flat Black acrylic paint onto her face, rather than the gloss I tend to use. I had it for the longest time, and I figured it would be an easier way to tell the texture difference between the line art and the base of the body. Speaking of the body, I also put some on there too, just in the off chance I decide to give her a more revealing dress, but given the type of character she is, I don't think she'd do that. It's there anyway. I intended to give her orange pupils of sorts on top of the red, but it just didn't work out because all of my orange is dead, so I just put some gold on top of there, and it actually looks pretty good. Now that her body was set, I was able to finally use some stretchy fabric to make a cool dress. I used Delightful's standard dress pattern, modded it a little bit because I couldn't for the life of me figure out the ruffle, and added some fur on top of there instead. And after switching out her shoes a couple times, testing out the two different boots that I had, I eventually went with the copper boots that came from the Katrine Demure doll that is now my Dollsona. And with that, she's done for now. The hands actually turned out pretty good, you know, considering all the problems I had with resin this time around. But that's not a bad idea, making a cast of like the doll hands with some crazy hands on top of it, and then just making repeated casts of it so that you can just pop it onto some random doll forearms, and then pop the forearms with the elbows, and that's something to look into for later. As for a name, I was actually kind of stuck. One of my friends suggested Bright, like Tiger Tiger Burning Bright, but I'm not as keen on it myself, but it's not entirely out of the question. I'll keep it in mind. But for now, I'm done rambling about this girl. Have a good day, night, or whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later. Time to finally use this fabric that I randomly found.